Hi, everyone. Karen Roby here for Tech Republic. Happy today to be joined by Ira Cohen. Ira's the Chief Data Scientist with Anodot. Thanks for being with me here today.
Thank you for having me.
Most certainly. Ira, this has been 2020, of course, was a year we never expected. And, tech and CIOs have been in the spotlight as they've tried to move their companies through this pandemic and to somewhat establish a new normal for companies. But as we're heading now and starting into 2021, CIOs, we're going to talk specifically about AI. Need to have a checklist of sorts and some things to keep in mind when making decisions for this coming year, whether that be about hiring or projects to consider. Let's start with the talent that's needed at companies now to pull off some of these AI projects and what's needed. What do you think that CIOs need to keep in mind?
Right. So, as you said, 2020 was really special in all this disruption to so many businesses, and AI actually is now becoming even more important. The projects that maybe people talked about before have been accelerated now because the speed of movement to new paradigms has to be much faster. If you're talking about, for example, commerce, supply chains need to move much faster. A lot of different projects that maybe before were slowly moving towards more e-commerce and more shipment. I mean, you're getting your Amazon, but now so many companies are sending their what they're selling out. The, that you have to have a lot more automation and be a lot more mindful to the data and be a lot more reactive to how things change constantly. Things are changing much faster, and AI is the perfect thing to manage all of that. If we talk about AI in a very global sense, because it has the capability of processing data very fast, giving you insights very fast at very high volumes of data, which is what's happening now. That's what's needed. So now, what do you need to actually have in your company in order to actually be able to achieve these goals of these projects? So the first order of business, and this is something that companies have been doing in the last few years, is put all your data together. So create these data lakes, and data lakes has been very popular and growing in companies like Snowflake and other types of companies have grown tremendously in the last few years, because that's what they offer. But now to leverage those data lakes, you need the data engineers that know how to pull data quickly out of them and serve them to the data science team that can actually transform them with algorithms into meaningful insights. So data engineers is something that is going to be required a lot more in the next year or so, because without those data pipelines, laying those data pipelines that will feed all these AI algorithms and projects, there's nothing. AI doesn't work without data, at least the AI that we have today. And then comes the machine learning engineers. So today, data science has been something that has grown in the last few years, and data scientists are the ones that are developing the AI required for all these projects. But data scientists, a lot of what was hired was basically people that do analysis. They do kind of one-off projects. And now, because these things are starting to be more and more automated, you don't need just a data scientist who know how to do a project well and prototype something, but you need the engineers that will make it into products, even if they're internal products. So it's not a project anymore. It's internal products that have to constantly work for the company to deliver at the rate that they need to deliver. So these two areas, the data engineers and the machine learning engineers, and not just the scientists, these are probably the areas where you need to, I believe CIOs need to invest most in their companies.
And when you look or consider the talent pool, Ira, how much of a disparity are we talking about here as far as supply and demand when it comes to these more specialized areas with AI machine learning? I mean, do we have the
Right.
talent to fill the positions that we're going to need?
Um, no, I
Yeah.
think there's still a big gap. There's still a big gap, but what's happening in the market in general is that the whole field of AI or machine learning is being democratized by all sorts of tools that are either being wrapped into loose products or open source completely, from Google, from Facebook, from companies that have actually invested a lot in developing the, let's say, the foundations that you would need. And then the talent pool that needs to use it, they don't have to know they don't have to have the knowledge as deeply as the people who developed all these tools. So there is a better hope of getting a lot more talent into the area without the need for them to get PhDs in order to be able to do this. And that is happening in parallel. So with good education, with good courses, you can actually get junior machine learning engineers that can start bringing value. Where the gap is in the more senior ones, the ones that do have experience, because you can't just hire just junior people. They won't have a clue what to do. You do need some sense of the field. So the gap is in the machine learning engineers that are kind of, I would say, the mid-tier, and the experts, of course, that will always be a gap, but the mid-tier that can teach the juniors how to work, that's where most of the gap is today, I believe.
And Ira, when there's no question that AI has been, put on. It's been fast tracked for many companies now that may not have even been considering taking, moving in that direction yet, until their digital transformation plans were really put on fast forward as well.
Right.
From March of 2020. So, is there any particular industry you're really seeing where it's being embraced even more?
So we're seeing it in all sorts of commerce, where even if it was half brick and mortars, half online, now this has pushed them quite significantly. Supply chains and deliveries are definitely a big push in those type of companies. And telcos, we've also seen in telcos a very big push towards AI, and it's driven by two things that happen now in parallel. One is the virus, right? The whole pandemic, which actually put a lot more pressure on networks and made them even more important, and actually brought some of the telcos basically that provide all the foundations for our communications, brought them to the front and center back. And 5G is the second one that's happening in parallel. So 5G changing and coming to play, creating a lot more data, a lot more complexities in the networks, is also pushing them to implement AI to actually being able to manage all that complex infrastructure, which is becoming even more complex and even more critical.
Yeah, most definitely. That is for sure. Ira, before we wrap up here, when you look to say 9 months to a year from now, um, how do you see AI playing a role? Even versus now, and again, how is that going to change things overall? For businesses from small businesses into huge enterprise companies.
So I think small businesses will leverage AI for particular tasks, small tasks, and probably the adoption there will be less, because AI at the end of the day is fueled by data. And if you don't have a lot of data, you can make your own decisions fairly quickly anyways. But for larger companies, the ones that do not embrace it and do not start using it heavily to make better decisions, to forecast the future, they'll be left behind, because they are not going to benefit from the improved either margins by being more efficient, or improved ability to sell more because of what those tools will give, and they will start losing out. So there's definitely a race for them to actually do this, to embrace it quickly. For the small businesses, I think it will be slower to embrace, unless it's for very particular tasks that before they could not do, because they could not hire the people to do it. But now they'll get the tool that already does it for a small fraction of that price, if they had to develop it themselves, and then they can run away with it. I mean, even looking at just simple e-commerce sites, right? You're trying to sell something and you want to have a recommendation engine like Amazon has a recommendation engine on their website, which does improve how much you're selling. Today, a small website or a small seller cannot develop it themselves. It's too expensive. But with it becoming available as a service from companies, they can actually start using it for a fraction of the price and get the benefit of it even for themselves. So for point tools, it will give them a benefit. They'll probably want to buy it though, and not try to develop it themselves.
Yeah, most certainly. Ari, really appreciate your time here today and talking with us again. Ira Cohen,
Oh,
data scientist at Anadot. Much more on AI, machine learning, what you need to know on Tech Republic. We hope you'll check us out there. Thanks for watching, everyone.